Default setting explained by cliches. Imagine someone has just finished working a 9 to 5 and is on his way home. Stressed and tired, he opens the door to his home and sees the house dirty and in disarray. The immediate response is to yell, scream, punish, or enforce the rules that are at hand. Almost every adult has experienced this and reacted in a similar way. According to David Wallace, this is our default setting. Quote, which is to be deeply and literally self-centered and to see and interpret everything through this lens of self. End quote. Wallace's view on default setting and the way he introduces it is very eye-opening. He includes examples, his own research, and even his own experiences to help his audience better understand. This is why his essay and the main theme it holds is so agreeable, because it leaves the audience with zero questions. While listening to David Wallace, some might notice that he uses a lot of metaphors, cliches, or stories to better explain his point. Coincidentally, he used a cliche to introduce the default setting argument. The cliche was, quote, the liberal arts cliche by teaching you how to think is actually shorthand for a much deeper, more serious idea. Learning how to think really means learning how to exercise some control over how and what you think. End quote. After introducing the cliche, he goes on, giving an example of default setting in real life. He ends the example off by stating, quote, or of course, if I'm in a more socially conscious, liberal arts form of my default setting, I can spend time in the end of the day, traffic being disgusted about all the huge, stupid, lane-blocking SUVs and Hummers and V12 pickup trucks, burning their wasteful, selfish 40-gallon tanks of gas, and I can dwell on the fact that the patriotic or religious bumper stickers always seem to be on the biggest, most disgustingly selfish vehicles driven by the ugliest, most inconsiderate, and aggressive drivers. End quote. As seen in the sentence, he ties the liberal arts cliche back into the end of his argument, which in turn helped his audience better understand the correlation between the two. This helped to lead him into what the opposite of the liberal arts default setting would be: the correct way to think. Now, with that being said, all arguments have counter-arguments. David Wallace did a great job of explaining the counter-arguments for all his arguments. This is what made his essay so easily agreeable. He kept in line with the idea of intellectual honesty. Here's a perfect example. Wallace's argument was, you get to consciously decide what has meaning and what doesn't. You get to decide what to worship. End quote. The statement that he was arguing against was the idea that people have to follow along with their automatic default setting. They have no choice. According to Wallace, that isn't true. No one has to sit in the traffic thinking only about her own personal problems or how this large Hummer in the front of him is driving too slow and is messing up his plans for the day. Instead, people should try to, here's another cliche, put themselves in other people's shoes. Walk a day in their lives. The audience was able to grasp both sides of this argument due to him introducing the argument he was going to be disagreeing with, explaining it, and then explaining his own argument, thereby giving the audience a chance to choose their own side without any persuasion, allowing them to choose what to worship. In conclusion, David Foster Wallace's essay, This is Water, is an intellectual, argumentative eye-opener. He offers a second opinion to multiple ideas, such as the idea of atheism, the real meaning of liberal arts, and the correct way to think, while keeping true to his main theme, default setting. It was very easy to agree with and very understandable on a basic level. Now, some might say that his essay was mostly opinionated, but the response to that would be, aren't all arguments opinionated at first? They were just thoughts in someone's head that, with research and approval from others, became facts. If extra research is needed, there are multiple articles on default settings explaining exactly what Wallace said, just not as simple or as entertaining.